While Xbox as a brand is not doing its best right now, it can be pretty easy to forget just how incredible the Big X's early days were. Weird, slightly alien, and boasting a controller from lead architect Andre the Giant, the OG Xbox was more than capable of stepping up to fill the void sadly left by Sega. But what about the games on the giant obelisk from space? Were those any good? Well, as these 50 games will attest, they were some of the greatest of all time. Hey, speaking of, pretty much every console platform had their mascot platformer back in the day. For PlayStation, they started with the Crash Bandicoot franchise before moving to Jak and Ratchet on PS2. For Nintendo, it's obviously Bubsy. When Microsoft revealed the Xbox then, with The Rock standing side by side with Bill Gates, it was clear that the Xbox was going to try and find a mascot of its own. Enter Blinx the Time Sweeper, a cat with a vacuum cleaner that can control time. Gaming used to be so peak. As Blinx, you're trying to stop a gang of pigs from travelling through time and destroying the world. To do that, you'll use a vacuum cleaner that allows Blinx to stop, slow down, fast forward and rewind time. You can also hit record to create a clone of himself, and you'll need to use all of those abilities to solve the game's various combat and platforming puzzles. Reviews at the time weren't the most glowing, but if you want a platformer unlike anything else out in the early 2000s, Blinx deserves props for uniqueness alone. You wouldn't get this today, you just wouldn't. If zombies appear in video games, 99 times out of 100 they're common cannon fodder. Stubbs the Zombie in Rebel Without a Pulse is that 1 in a 100 game, with players controlling the eponymous undead as he finds himself in the retro-futuristic city of Punchball in 1959. Immediately after rising from his grave, Stubbs starts relieving the local populace of the old grey matter, with the full game revealing both the origins of Stubbs, Punchball, and the reason for the zombie outbreak. A sort of action-adventure game with light strategy elements, Stubbs has the ability to devour the brains of his enemies, which has the two-pronged benefit of recovering his health and recruiting new rotting corpses to your horde. Besides being a charismatic leader of the undead, Stubbs also wields lots of his own combat abilities, mostly to do with exploding body parts for some reason. There's a fair bit of jank to this one, but it possesses a unique energy that can only be found on the OG Xbox. Listen, did you guys even know this existed? Let us know down below. After the failure of the Dreamcast, Sega really hitched their wagon to Xbox for a while. Sure, games like Sonic Adventure were released on other platforms, but Sega also started developing arcade games using an arcade board developed alongside Microsoft called the Chihiro. This board led to the release of arcade whippers like The House of the Dead 3, Outrun 2, and Virtual Cop 3, while older arcade games like Spike Out were also brought to the Xbox. The best of the bunch though had to be Crazy Taxi 3 High Roller. Essentially the deluxe edition version of Crazy Taxi as a whole, Crazy Taxi 3 includes the characters and maps from the first two games, along with all the added techniques and refinements that the second game brought, such as multiple passengers and Crazy Hop. Throw in a brand new Las Vegas inspired level, a brand new collection of minigames in the form of Crazy X, and a whole new vehicle type to unlock, and you've got a game that refines rather than reinvents a classic. Still incredibly fun though. It's also fun to say taxi in Welsh, which is taxi. There you go. Say what you want about Lovecraft, like his terrible pet names, but the world of Cthulhu and its surrounding mythos has had a chokehold on the horror genre for the last century, basically. People can't even touch cosmic horror or large squiddy bastards without earning some kind of comparison to Lovecraft's seminal work, so it's not surprising that when survival horror became one of the most successful video game genres out there, someone would try and pay homage to the master of it all. Enter Call of Cthulhu: Dark Corners of the Earth. While it does share the name with the story that kicked off the lot, Call of Cthulhu: Dark Corners of the Earth has more in common with other short stories surrounding the town of Innsmouth. Players control Jack Walters, an amnesiac mental patient private detective sent to investigate the town of Innsmouth while also investigating the missing 6 years of his memory. I wonder if that's connected. A famous commercial flop, Dark Corners included plenty of cinematic choices like a lack of HUD that have become staples in the years since, so it is incredibly ahead of its time. Also, it can be bloody terrifying. Arguably the game responsible for the most famous gaming peripheral not related to Guitar Hero, Steel Battalion felt like a bet from Capcom about how much they could get us to spend on plastic tat. The answer was about $200. The main selling point of Steel Battalion was of course the controller that aimed to make players feel like they were in control of a giant mech, and apparently to accomplish that you need a giant switchboard looking thing with dozens of buttons, a radio dial, 2 joysticks, 3 pedals and more. Despite walking weapons platforms not being a thing right now, Capcom were trying to create a heavy simulation focus with Steel Battalion, with small details like your vehicle falling over if you turn too fast, making it one of the wildest mech games at the time. Special mention should also go out to its sequel, Line of Contact, which was an online-focused affair that included a full faction campaign mode with persistent battlefields. Sure, the servers were taken offline within 2 years, but that's nothing if not incredibly ambitious. We'd be amped to see another one. If you wanted snowboarding games in the early to mid 2000s, the simple answer was typically SSX. EA's brilliant Extreme Sports series was available on pretty much every platform and captured the boisterousness of extreme sports pretty effectively. History should also give more props to Microsoft Game Studios though, as they worked with Salt Lake Game Studio to work on the Amped games, which were a worthy competitor to SSX's snowboarding crown, but have kind of been forgotten about really. As for which Amped game is better, Amped 1 and 2 were different beasts altogether, and so we're cheating and jamming them into one. Amped 1 aimed to be more of a simulation of snowboarding, leveraging the power of the Xbox hard drive to render full motion resorts in real time, allowing for unparalleled exploration for the time and complete freestyle runs. No linear courses here. Amped 2 felt a bit more arcadey in its approach, but the introduction of snow skates as an option is something no other snowboarding game has done, making it unique and worthwhile for that alone. We can't decide which one is best, so play them both and enjoy some forgotten snowboarding goodness. Ordinarily, we wouldn't put a Japanese-only exclusive on one of these rankings, as few people would have played it at the time, but thanks to the Devolver Digital port to more modern systems in 2019, more people are aware of the ridiculousness of Metal Wolf Chaos. If you're part of the unaware, here's the elevator pitch. You play as the President of the United States who must fight a coup d'etat from his Vice President, all in a giant mech suit. Oh, and it's developed by a pre-Dark Souls From Software exclusively for the original Xbox. Before the Souls games, From Software were perhaps most known for their Armored Core series, so another mech game isn't actually outside of their wheelhouse too much, but a predominantly comedic take on American politics with mech suits is a ludicrous addition to their library. And yes, I did say ludicrous. The game itself is not much more than some simplistic blasting through a series of linear levels, purchasing upgrades as you progress, but there is genuine fun to be had here with a bonkers premise and B-movie level voice acting that doesn't panzer to the audience. Another Sega series that managed to find a home on the OG Xbox after the Dreamcast and Saturn crashed and burned, Panzer Dragoon Auto was the fourth and final game in the series. It was also developed by a different development team to the first 3 games, albeit with a few veterans who stuck around for the love of the game, which has led to some notably mixed feelings from even the development staff on its place within the wider series. Some felt that Saga was already a fitting conclusion, and Auto kind of tarnished that slightly. Regardless of the previous game though, Panzer Dragoon Auto is still an immaculate on-rail shooter, with players mounting an all-powerful dragon and laying waste to anything in the vicinity. Playing as Auto, you'll contend with a post-apocalyptic world filled with bio-engineered mutants left over from a previous war, and an evil empire intent on using genealogy for nefarious means. It's an incredibly short game, which is why it's not higher in this ranking, but Panzer Dragoon Auto is an unmissable OG Xbox game. We have talked about Sega a lot so far, and we've talked about From Software already, but what if we were to get some peanut butter on your chocolate, or some chocolate in your peanut butter? While Sega might have only helped when it came to publishing From Software's action RPG Otogi Myth of Demons in the West, it still marks a historic 2-time partnership between one gaming juggernaut and a sleeping dragon. These days a partnership like that would break the gaming news cycle. Elden Ring skins in Sonic, but back then we simply didn't know better. On the surface, Otogi might look like it's copying Onimusha's homework a little bit, but with FromSoft at the helm, you know you're in for a challenging yet engaging action RPG where you fight demons in feudal Japan. There's multiple weapon categories, plenty of magic to learn, and a story that encourages at least a second playthrough to understand the full context. If you like this take on demons in Japan, FromSoft released a sequel a year later with more characters to unlock and play. Both are realistic, and they're backwards compatible with current Xboxes. Dust saying. Another example of the Xbox showing games that were creative and different from whatever else was on the market, and another example of Xbox trying and failing to court favour with the Eastern markets. Phantom Dust is a weird old one. An action RPG and strategy game that utilises digital collectible cards and deck building, Phantom Dust feels like it dropped about 20 years too early. Say all those buzzwords now and some publisher is going to try and sign you to create the next big indie-ish hit, but back in the 2000s, you're likely just going to get plenty of confused looks. Set in a post-apocalyptic Earth covered by dust, the game follows the few remaining humans called Espers who are able to utilise the dust. Before each level, you build your deck filled with skills of both offensive and defensive abilities, and must use them to try and survive various challenges and bosses. The gameplay is unlike much else out there, the story is bonkers and bleak in equal measure, and there's even multiplayer if you want to play cards with your friends. Underrated at the time and still kind of underrated now despite modern ports, Phantom Dust is absolutely among the best Xbox games of all time. Flight games are typically more simulation heavy in their approach. Sure, logging 100 hours in Ace Combat doesn't mean the military is going to let you pilot an F-16. But having to go through the motions of takeoff and landing while dealing with semi-realistic physics makes most flight games feel more like a simulation. Crimson Sky's High Road to Revenge, the sequel to the PC flight game from the year 2000 that's loosely based on a board game, takes flight simulation and kicks it out of the airlock, or like cockpit? Poop deck? Set in an alternate version of the 1930s, players control Nathan Zachary, an air pirate trying to avenge the death of his friend. There's a swashbuckling aesthetic that's immediately obvious to anyone who plays this game, and the physics, aircraft and weaponry all play into that too. You want realism? Head on over to Microsoft Flight Simulator instead, as Crimson Skies is all about shooting down not Nazis, and looking good while doing it. It's fun, and it's one of several original Xbox games we're ranking today that's still available to buy on the modern Xbox store. Listen, we don't have enough time in this video to break down the sheer enormity of the BattleTech universe. Suffice it to say though that it is a big tabletop wargaming craze with plenty of PC games that have come back to consoles in recent years in the form of MechWarrior. Back in the early 2000s though, the idea of a BattleTech game on console was a more novel concept, so much so that the idea was pitched to Microsoft by developers Day One Studios. The result was Mech Assault, which just so happened to launch on the most mech-loving console of all time. Set within the BattleTech universe, the mechs in Mech Assault are a bit nippier than in Steel Battalion, with players controlling a battle mech pilot as they try to repel an invasion on the planet Helios. It's definitely a more arcadey take on mech combat, which helped make Mech Assault one of the first big successes of Xbox Live, thanks to its online multiplayer components. All of these features were built upon in the sequel Mech Assault 2 Lone Wolf, which added new playable vehicles and more. Both Mech Assault games make a wonderful duo, still worth seeking out today. You'd think it'd be easier to make a game about Marvel's lean, mean rage machine, but for whatever reason, most games that feature the Incredible Hulk tend to be incredibly dull. The tie-in to the 2003 Ang Lee film spent too much time turning Bruce Banner into Solid Snake, while the Sega tie-in to the 2008 film is just a mess. The less said about Marvel's Avengers as well, the better. It seems like it's inevitable that the Incredible Hulk Ultimate Destruction is destined forever to be the strongest one there is. Interestingly, the similarities between Ultimate Destruction and the Edward Norton MCU film are hilarious, with Brucey on the run from General Ross, who's recruited Emil Blonsky to track Banner. Blonsky then ends up becoming the Abomination, while Banner teams up with Samuel Stearns to try and find a cure for the Hulk problem. The solution for all of these things, well, play as the Hulk and smash everything into a fine concrete paste. It's simple and repetitive, but it is a open world banger from the team who went on to make Prototype. Clearly, they knew their strength. Let's just admit it to ourselves right now, we are never getting that sequel to Beyond Good and Evil. Ubisoft have confirmed that development on the sequel is still ongoing, with the same level of insistence and possible deception as someone in a zombie film swearing that they haven't been bitten, but we'll believe it when we see it. Even if that sequel never comes, or it does come out and manages to be absolutely crap, we'll always have that original Beyond Good and Evil game to replay over and over again. A stealth action-adventure game from 2003, Beyond Good and Evil sees investigative reporter Jade going above and beyond for her story by working with a resistance movement to uncover a vast conspiracy. Jade uses her photography skills along with athletics and skill with a big combat style to take the fight to the aliens, leading to one of the best and most varied 3D adventure games on the 6th generation of consoles. If you want an all-timer of an escapade, Beyond Good and Evil deserves to be played by everyone at least once. Also, you cannot outrun me mentioning that it got sold with cheese every time the game comes up. What a wild time. We actually have the Xbox to thank for Outrun making any kind of comeback, and yes, we are circling back to that partnership between Microsoft and Sega. Using the Chihiro board, Sega AM2 developed Outrun 2 for release in arcades in 2003 before being ported over to the Xbox in 2004. It was the first Outrun game in over a decade, and bizarrely the 4th ever Outrun release, and it revitalized the classic racing game by retaining the easy to learn, hard to master controls and mixing them with some of the most ageless 6th generation graphics you'll ever see. Outrun 2's Xbox port was great already, but Outrun 2006 Coast to Coast is another beast entirely. Essentially a definitive edition of Outrun 2, the game includes all the tracks from the original Outrun 2, along with the 15 new ones from the arcade release of Outrun 2 SP. Throw in more cars than ever from Ferrari, plenty of unlockables to collect, and the biggest single player mode in Outrun history, and this deserves to be remembered at the front of the pack as far as racing game royalty is concerned. The Jack Black and Adrian Brody fronted remake of King Kong might not have set cinema alight in the same way the original film did, but it did bring us a wee little whipper of a tie-in game courtesy of Ubisoft. Just like Hulk, you'd think a King Kong game would be easy to make, as you'd have the big ape rampaging through forests and eventually New York smashing everyone in sight. Simple but effective, and while there are those levels in this 2005 release, the real meat and potatoes comes with the other 75% of the game. When not playing as the big monkey himself, King Kong casts you as Jack Driscoll, as you use whatever makeshift weapons and firearms you can find to try and survive the horrors of Skull Island. There is a food chain to manipulate, leading to some inventive puzzle solving alongside some terrifying creatures to fight, which makes for a surprising highlight in a game that could have been altogether brainless. It might be ranked a bit too high for some here, but we genuinely reckon this is an all-time great FPS game. Don't make us say it 2 times. 2x. Segway. Is Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2X the best Tony Hawk's game on the original Xbox? That arguably depends on how much you preferred THPS 4's approach to a free roaming career mode, or the changes in Underground onwards that allowed you to get off your board and stretch your legs. However, until Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 dropped in 2020, THPS 2X was the definitive collection of the first 2 games in the series, taking all of the levels and adding new features from the more recent THPS 3 to really seal the deal. Essentially an exclusive director's cut for the start of the Tony Hawk series, players skate their way through the levels of THPS 2, only for them to then unlock all the levels from the first game as well. These come with added benefits like the ability to create female skaters or an actual balance meter for grinds, but the real coup de grace is the 5 bonus levels exclusive to 2X. Some parts of these levels have been recycled over the years, most notably Tampa Skate Park being used in Thug, but they weren't included in the 2020 remake, making 2X a wholly unique entry in a beloved banger of a series. If you want to know where Crytek got their obsession with highly trained killers fighting mercs on island archipelagos, you look at the original Far Cry. The first PC game was developed by Crytek and pioneered the open-ended levels that would become the Far Cry staple. Here's an outpost, you can attack it from any angle, have fun. You all know the drill by now. Naturally, its success meant a console port, and while Far Cry Instincts isn't quite as open as its PC counterpart thanks to the lesser power of the Xbox compared to PC, it is altogether more bonkers. A remake of that first game, complete with an altered storyline and characters, players control Jack Carver as he escorts a journalist named Val to a mysterious cluster of islands. Immediately, he's attacked by mercenaries, and the plot basically turns into the island of Dr. Moreau, but with automatic weapons. There's a mad scientist doing gene editing research, you get a bunch of cool feral powers, and must carve a path through the hordes of heavily armoured goons. It might have been overshadowed by Halo, but don't sleep on Far Cry Instincts on the OG. Sid Meier has become a name in the gaming industry that's just as legendary as Hideo Kojima, Shigeru Miyamoto, and Joseph Fares. That last one, yeah, might be a bit premature, but he made Jeff Keighley squirm in his tighty Nikes, so he will always have our respect. Moving back to Sid Meier, he might be most famous for his work on the Civilization series, arguably the be-all and end-all in strategy games, but if you feel like being a swashbuckling scoundrel instead of a world conqueror, consider Pirates. Essentially a full-blown remake of the original Pirates on the Commodore 64, Sid Meier's Pirates for the Xbox sees players controlling a young, newly minted pirate on the Caribbean seas, seeking revenge against the villainous Marquis de la Montalban. Players earn fame by taking on rival crews, engaging in duels, romancing the daughters of prominent governors, and more. While the sailing might not be as in-depth as something like Sea of Thieves these days, this is still one of the definitive pirate experiences on console. Rest in peace Tomonobu Itagaki. If there's one thing you were exceptionally good at, it was having ninjas doing cinematically cool shit. Enter Dead or Alive, the flashiest 3D fighting game in history and one of the most pleasing to watch brawlers. You might think we're saying that because of the overactive yams, but we're actually talking about juggling. What we're saying is that Dead or Alive's gameplay is always entertaining to watch because just look at it. The series might have started life on the Dreamcast and in arcades before later appearing on PS2, but the franchise took on new life when DOA 3 dropped on the original Xbox. Functionally, the game isn't much different from 2, albeit with some changes to make the game easier for beginners to grasp, but the real improvements come from the graphic enhancements. Bigger stages, better character models and lighting, along with a pretty memorable final boss, make DOA 3 a true fighting game legend on the original Xbox that still looks like it comes from the future. Another Dreamcast emigrator. It's amazing that we even got one Jet Set Radio game, never mind a sequel. There's no amount of words that can do justice to the chokehold that cel-shaded graffiti em-ups had on Y2K era gamers. Hell, the effects and influences of Jet Set Radio are still being felt today thanks to games like Bomb Rush Cyberpunk, and with another Jet Set game on the way, we're hopeful that our best times of funky beats, laying tags and punching cops are ahead of us. Still, that new game will have a hell of a job trying to top Jet Set Radio Future. A part sequel, part remake, part alternate reality experience according to composer Hideki Naganuma, apparently, Jet Set Radio Future sees the GGs clashing with rival gangs and the authoritarian Rokaku group on the streets of a future Tokyo. The graphical style is a little bit darker than the original Dreamcast game, but the cel-shaded vibrancy is on full display, now with bigger environments and no time limits. It's bigger, just as fun as the original, and oh boy, that soundtrack will always slap. Forgive us, but we've reached the Cultured Vultures has to talk about the Punisher portion of this video. If you've been around the channel for a while, you've probably seen us do it before, so just bear with us for a minute. If not, let's talk about how Volition's The Punisher is one of the best games on the original Xbox. Now, is it the cleanest, the most refined, or the best example of video games being high art? No. But you get to run rampant through hordes of goons with high-powered weaponry and the skills to commit nothing less than gratuitous violence. While not related to the 2004 film of the same name, The Punisher did see Thomas Jane reprise his role as Frank Castle, taking him back to his old stomping grounds of New York City. Here, Frankie Boy has to contend with various crime families like the Nucci's, the Russian Mafia, and even the Yakuza. Add plenty of comic book villains like Bushwhacker, Jigsaw, and Bullseye, and it's a bit of a bad day at the office for Castle. Thankfully, The Punisher never met a problem he couldn't murder his way out of, and in the game, murder is always a huge dub. Normally, Need for Speed gets all the limelight in rankings like these, so permit us the chance to gush about Midnight Club instead for once. Rockstar's now forgotten and abandoned street racing franchise, Midnight Club, 2 especially, took players around the world and had them race at blisteringly high speeds while looking at some of the most horrifying character models of all time. Midnight Club 3 dialed back the international aspect along with the character models, focusing instead on tight racing physics and impeccable open world design. Set across 3 American cities of San Diego, Atlanta, and Detroit, you'll enter various street racing tournaments and mingle with the different clubs who specialise in certain vehicle types. From SUVs to muscle cars, bikes, supercars and tuners, vehicles of all kinds were represented in Midnight Club 3, making it feel like a more comprehensive racing experience than something like Need for Speed. There's something about open world street racing on bikes that hits the right vibe, especially when racing at night, and Midnight Club 3 absolutely nails it all. It's possible that even Ubisoft didn't know how much of a winner they were onto when they decided to revive the Prince of Persia series for the 6th generation of consoles. Even though it had only been a few years since Prince of Persia 3D for PC and Dreamcast, the poor quality of that release meant expectations were lowered heading into Ubisoft's take on the franchise, The Sands of Time. The end result was a 3D adventure platformer that arguably changed the landscape of gaming forever. Prince of Persia The Sands of Time wasn't the first action adventure to include heaps of platforming puzzles, considering Tomb Raider had been around for years before that. The Sands of Time parkour, platforming and wall climbing inspired everything that came after it though, with practically every action adventure game including easily climbable and clearly signposted walls. White scuff marks were the yellow paint of 2003, people. Anyway, incredible combat, puzzles and platforming, aided by the gimmick of controlling time, which is always fun, made The Sands of Time a 6th generation banger. These days, getting any sort of new game out of Rockstar feels like pulling teeth. GTA 6 got delayed around the time of writing, if you can tell. Go back to the turn of the millennium though, and Rockstar were developing and or publishing multiple games a year, and they were all bangers. Yep, all of them, every single one. While the likes of GTA and Bully have gone down in history, another Rockstar whipper that we'll always take a chance to talk about is The Warriors, whoever decided to make a tie-in for a then 25-year-old movie cooked. Honestly. Based on the movie from 1979 about the eponymous gang's odyssey through New York on one fateful night, Rockstar's The Warriors functions as a full prologue to the film. All the characters are given fleshed out backstories, while the various gangs of NYC are given more time and development too. For fans of a cult classic piece of cinema, The Warriors is a perfect accompaniment, but even if you play the game without seeing the film, you're still getting a wonderfully brutal brawler with a surprisingly deep multiplayer experience. The long-gone pandemic deserve all the credit in the world for creating the Star Wars Battlefront series and arguably popularising the hero shooter genre. Sure, they were 5 years too late to beat Team Fortress to the punch on PC, but when it comes to consoles, we were yet to see a proper class-based multiplayer shooter. 2004's Battlefront might have started the gaming masses' love affair with Battlefront at large, but Battlefront 2 a year later really cemented the formula for many. For starters, it actually lets players have a go as the heroes. And the naughty boys. Essentially a bigger, more content-complete sequel, Battlefront 2 offers players a campaign where players control a clone trooper both before and after Order 66, allowing you to experience a good and evil playthrough in one go. Meanwhile, Galactic Conquest allowed multiple players to engage in either a competitive or cooperative version of Star Wars Risk, as players vie for control of the entire galaxy. Chuck in some amazing Xbox Live multiplayer for those who were privileged enough at the time, and Battlefront 2 was an unmissable multiplayer experience. From one pandemic-developed LucasArts published game to another, we swear this wasn't intentional, Mercenaries Playground of Destruction feels like a true version of what an open-world game could be. Sure, pandemic might have nearly caused an international incident when they released them, with South Korea actually banning the game from sale because of its depiction of the conflict between North and South Korea, but we'd love it if more games were able to just let us loose behind enemy lines and also ruin diplomatic relations. Do it more. Why not? It's a bit fun. Set inside North Korea, you control one of 3 mercenaries sent in to hunt down the Deck of 52, which make up the key military personnel of the Ankei leadership. In order to ascertain their positions though, you need to make nice with the various factions, manage your reputation by performing missions and, not being a rampaging gun nut. If you want an open world that gives you the freedom to tackle it how you see fit, Mercenaries is the game for you. Plus, there's a hidden code to play as Han Solo and Indiana Jones. Who doesn't love that? Well, probably Harrison Ford, but yeah. The Oddworld series made a name for itself with the misadventures of an unusual bloke named Abe. The mystical Mudokon guided players through 3 epic quests before the series shifted gears to a first and third person western starring the mysterious Stranger. Stranger's Wrath sees the titular character set out on his own path, completely detached from the original trilogy. Using an arsenal of live ammunition derived from living beings that's fired from a nifty crossbow, Stranger hunts down bounties to collect money for a life-saving operation. Though it's nothing like its predecessors, Stranger's Wrath is just as eccentric, weird, and delightfully entertaining. It has been ported to a lot of modern platforms, so if you're wanting to become the second best bounty hunter in pop culture, the first obviously being Dog the Bounty Hunter, you're in luck. As the third entry in the Time Splitter series with the biggest budget and the biggest expectations, Future Perfect had every opportunity to be a bit of a letdown. However, the game's quirkiness, various locations across time, co-op and competitive multiplayer resulted in an unforgettable entry into one of the best FPS series of all, well, time. Sergeant Cortez returns on a mission across time to stop the Time Splitters race from ever being created. While the campaign had its moments, particularly when Cortez battled zombies and ghosts, it was the multiplayer that helped drive the game's popularity. Future Perfect also featured a level editor that allowed players to create different complex levels to share around, but if you're anything like me, you just spawned everyone in a massive room and cackled like a maniac as stuff started blowing up. A new Time Splitters game was in the works not too long ago, but we can't have nice things ever in this world. Quite unreal how they continue to mess this pretty simple series up really, but hey, at least we have Time Splitters Rewind now. It's been so long now since we had a new Unreal game that there will be people playing Fortnite and generally not knowing why it's working on the Unreal Engine. Well, they should know that Unreal was bloody brilliant. Unlike its Unreal predecessors, the Liandry Conflict on Xbox was a first and third person shooter, where players could swap on the fly to find their preferred playstyle. A sequel to Unreal Championship, the Liandry Conflict added character classes and a camera lock-on mechanic that compensated for the analog controls of console gaming. There's a story mode that is quite enjoyable, but it's the game's multiplayer and its 50 maps that everyone rightfully flocked to. Team Deathmatch, of course, and Capture the Flag rounded out the classic game modes, though the host could have some fun if they wished and altered games with the series' staple mutators. A whole lot of bloody squelchy mushy fun. If you're hoping to see more Unreal soon, you might want to wait for Fortnite to die off, or you guys could at least stop paying 20 quid for a skin of Homer Simpson maybe? There are games where thievery is a fun mechanic to just tinker around with. You know, Skyrim, putting the buckets on the heads and all that. In Thief though, it is a focal point as players can take control of Garrett, a master thief making his third appearance in a game that really showed just how wild lighting, or the lack of it, could feel back in the day. Deadly Shadows picks up after its predecessor, enhancing the experience with a large explorable living city. Rather than just follow a flow of steady missions in between quests, Garrett can eavesdrop on and steal from random citizens while seeking out side quests. Pretty immersive stuff. Thief Deadly Shadows was the series' first console release. It's a game I fondly remember blowing my mind back on the OG. And while arguably not the best entry overall, it brought the popular series to a whole new market. A market that would absolutely crash and die with the release of the titular Thief a few years later, a game that truly didn't know what it wanted to be. The IP has been dormant ever since, well, apart from a VR game? Sure, why not? No, not the Batman kart racer we all so desperately crave. PlayStation, Nintendo and Xbox each have their signature racing series. For PlayStation, it's Gran Turismo, for Nintendo it's Mario Kart, but it should be F-Zero. For Xbox, it may be Forza today, but it started with Project Gotham Racing, a series that plenty of fans still clamour for today. Unlike traditional racing games, Project Gotham wasn't just about finishing first. Players also had to complete challenges and score enough points to advance. It may have been a bit unconventional, but it was a good launching point for Microsoft's signature racing series and set the stage for Forza, and it's just really good fun today. Its style was even aped a little by Sony's own Drive Club on the PS4. Rest in peace, Drive Club, you deserved so much more. I just don't get it wasn't a hard sell or anything. Metal Gear Solid might have pioneered the 3D stealth genre on PS1 and later PS2, but Microsoft worked with Ubisoft to create their own generational hit in the form of Splinter Cell. Sure, Ubisoft would go on to publish the original Splinter Cell on other platforms about a year later, but for that 1 year the OG Xbox had the answer to the question of what can stand up to MGS. Said answer involved a highly acrobatic spy who was voiced by the brilliant Michael Ironside, with mechanics that focused more on light, sound and verticality than most other stealth games on console. Set in the world of Tom Clancy, where pretty much everyone is on DEFCON 1 at all times, Splinter Cell sees Sam Fisher recruited to the NSA's third echelon to deal with international threats. Players need to use the shadows in order to infiltrate objectives, shooting out lights and even climbing sheer walls to find the most advantageous spot. Consider all of the gadgets such as a deployable camera that can be fired into walls, and Splinter Cell gives players all the tools they need to become a stealth legend. Make a new one, you cowards. Do you love speeding down digital streets, duking out with competition for the first place spot? Well, that's not quite what Burnout is. Sure, you jump behind the wheel of some sweet rides in a high-speed race, but the primary goal is to take out the competition in a demolition derby-style race. You'll cruise through city streets and countryside, finding different ways to completely destroy opposing vehicles, whether you're knocking them into walls or forcing them into head-on traffic. Burnout 3 refines the series' concept for the best iteration of the arcade racer, complete with multiple game modes, new cars, and more. The ability to play your own music while ripping down the street was a feeling that you wanted to bottle forever at the time. I must have listened to American Idiot like 100 times while grinding World Tour. Someone get Criterion out of the Need for Speed content mines and please get them to make a new Burnout. Please. There are so many Star Wars games out there, so it says something when one is often described as one of the best, especially after all these years. Jedi Outcast continues to follow Kyle Katarn, an extended universe favourite who started his journey as an Imperial officer before joining the Resistance and discovering his connection to the Force. The game is an early example of how to effectively put players in control of a Jedi with a good blend of Force powers and fluid lightsaber combat. Though Katarn could have fit in modern Star Wars lore, the character is reserved for one of the best Star Wars stories to ever hit a console, and specifically the original Xbox. Some may view Star Wars Jedi as the modern versions of these games, but there's something about these that we think may be remembered for longer, even as everything fades to black. It doesn't get much more straightforward than grabbing two weapons and going to town on your enemies, and also looking really cool while doing it. Criterion weren't looking to revolutionise first-person shooting with fancy mechanics in black. Instead, it emphasised the best parts of action movies with cinema-inspired visuals, Hollywood-quality sound design, and destructible environments. Again, it just really wanted to be really cool. And it was. One of Black's most unique mechanics, for the time at least, was that players could carry only two weapons at a time, requiring them to strategise how they press forward in each mission, but usually it's just pick up another gun and shoot some more. It's also a game in which you often have to be on the move as your cover comes crumbling down around you. If there's a 6th generation game that could really thrive off a remake or even just a remaster, it could well be Black. Black did get a spiritual sequel of sorts called Body Count, but it's a bit too easy to count the sales on that one. After knocking it out of the park with another famous RPG we'll get to, BioWare decided to focus on an original IP that was still set a long time ago, but in our galaxy at least. The result was Jade Empire, which heavily drew on Chinese mythology and history, along with a love of kung fu cinema to tell a martial arts RPG epic. The player controls a character referred to by many as the Spirit Monk, who's raised from an early age as an orphan to become a martial arts prodigy. After several attacks on their home village, the monk sets out to both investigate the cause of all the undead popping up across the Empire and to take out the oppressive Emperor Sun Hai once and for all. Like all good BioWare games, to remember them, you'll meet a charming gallery of allies, some of which you can maybe even smooch right on the mouse, and make some devastating moral choices on your way to one of several endings. A Stone Cold classic, and one that we'd love to see make some kind of proper comeback. Shenmue II really pushed the limits of console gaming with mechanics you rarely even see in modern games, like how many games have arm wrestling these days? The answer is not enough. Not enough. This action-adventure classic follows Ryo Hazuki, a young martial artist seeking revenge for his father's murder. Ryo's journey is rife with plenty of people to beat up, but Sega AM2 really gave players a lot to do and witness, with large sandboxes to explore, minigames to enjoy, a day-night cycle and varying weather, and NPCs had their own schedules. Combat unfolds in brawler-style bouts, with Ryo taking on one or multiple opponents in a 3D space similar to Virtua Fighter. Despite a full English dub, the Xbox port did suffer a bit compared to the original Dreamcast game, but it remained an iconic release that fans clamoured for more of for many years. They eventually got what they wanted, though to mixed results. I still cannot believe that they left it on a cliffhanger again. 11 years and 4 months after the original Doom shook up PC gaming and, well, gaming in general forever, id Software returned to its breakout series with a completely different take. Whereas the first two games were more action-packed, Doom 3 took a slower-paced, more horrifying approach. While some of the narrative conventions remained, framing this third entry as a reboot of the series, the gameplay was overhauled to fit a survival horror experience. Though the series triumphantly returned to its action roots with the 2016 reboot, Doom 3 proved that the demonic romp on Mars had plenty of room for jump scares and bigger, badder enemies. I wouldn't mind seeing a slower Doom like this again, to be honest. Though Doom 3 first launched on PC, the Xbox version received a 2-player co-op version of the campaign and ranks among the best looking original Xbox games, and it doesn't perform too great these days, but it still looks pretty great. Seriously, play it for just 5 minutes now and the lighting still holds up remarkably well. The shotgun is still a bit rubbish though, sadly. Everyone is all about Call of Duty, well, maybe a bit less Call of Duty, and Battlefield these days, but there was a time when the wartime FPS market wasn't a monopoly of just two series, well, at least on console. Brothers in Arms stood up against the behemoths that outlasted it with entries like Road to Hill 30, a dramatic and tactical shooter that puts players in charge of a team of soldiers with a series of simple commands. The game emphasised the suppression and flanking tactics of World War II, the 4Fs, and gave players a more nuanced experience the series competition without getting super bogged down in ultra realism. It struck a pretty good balance. The game was so good in what it achieved that the History Channel actually used it to recreate historical scenarios in its Brother in Arms special. And you know what, it's kind of surprising that Ubisoft hasn't tried to make this IP into a World War II version of The Division in recent years. Did I just give them an idea? If you owned an Xbox during Fable's reveal and release, you likely already know that the game that eventually launched wasn't quite in line with the ambitious promises of Lionhead Studios' head honcho Peter Molyneux. Guys, if it sounds too good to be true, it is 99 times out of 10 too good to be true. Despite lacking much of what Molyneux stated would be included in what was to be the, quote, best game ever, Fable became a classic and one of the best Xbox games across its vast library. It shot for the stars, but instead landed in quite a nice restaurant and had a lovely burger. Players follow the hero's journey from the very start, using blades, longbows and magic to cut down fantastical foe on a quest to kill Jack of Blades. Along the way, the hero can be moulded through moral decisions. Will you follow a path of nobility and appear more angelic, or let your inner demon take control and grow horns? Or will you just fart on everyone and marry everything you can? You know what King Arthur would do. Double Fine has a knack for bringing the quirky and the strange to life. Its first venture, Psychonaut, set the stage for the company's ongoing success with the zany adventure of Rasputin, Raz Aquato. Looking to join the famed Psychonauts, Raz runs away from his circus family to put his psychic powers to the test. From telekinesis to pyrokinesis, Raz gradually learns new abilities as he helps the Psychonauts work through an exceptionally dangerous and complicated case and tackles his own demons at the same time. Psychonauts really went heavy-handed on aspects of the human mind, and Double Fine crafted a surprisingly deep and incredibly fun narrative that still packed quite the punch with unexpected themes for a platformer of the time. A sequel released many years later to just as much acclaim, with Double Fine themselves now being a part of the Xbox family. If you've not checked out either game, you really should. Dr. Gordon Freeman was an unlikely hero forced to face interdimensional horrors in the original Half-Life. No wonder the NHS waiting list is so long. Unfortunately, things didn't get any easier for him nearly 20 years later when he was awakened from stasis to find the world under the rule of the multi-dimensional Combine. His destiny once again chosen for him, Gordon is forced to join the Resistance, where he meets former Black Mesa scientist Dr. Eli Vance and his daughter, Alex. Half-Life 2 is a bit heavier on the narrative than its predecessor, with a fully fleshed out world full of aliens, oppressive regimes, and weird science, boasting the types of open environments rarely seen at the time, as well as just a whole bunch of crazy details. Half-Life 2 was a visual wonder, even on the original Xbox, and segments like the horror-filled Ravenholm have stuck with us for decades, and will do for a few decades more. Now granted, yep, you don't really want to play Half-Life 2 on the OG these days if you have the choice, but for the time, what an absolutely wild accomplishment. Team Ninja resurrected the Ninja Gaiden series in 2004 with a game that became known for seemingly hating its players. The following year, the development team doubled down with Ninja Gaiden Black, a reworking of the newer action-adventure featuring new enemies and a higher difficulty setting that really tested player patience. Team Ninja though did also make the game more accessible with the easier Ninja Dog mode after receiving many complaints, though players were made a mockery of with subtle changes to character interactions. Black also added 50 combat missions, giving players more time as Ryu Hayabusa, a super ninja with an arsenal of weapons and abilities used against a rogues gallery of unforgiving foes and punishing bosses. And before you think it, no, it is not Souls-like. Obviously, it's just difficult. But there is a high chance someone from Software played this and wanted someone else to feel a similar kind of suffering. How many of you even got past the first boss? Let us know down below. Before Richard B. Riddick, absolutely ridiculous name by the way, found himself entangled with the necromongers and going toe-to-toe with bioraptors, he was a captive of Butcher Bay. The stealth action FPS Escape from Butcher Bay follows the titular character as he navigates the maximum security prison, making temporary companions and lifelong enemies while trying to find his way out. As a prequel to Pitch Black, Escape from Butcher Bay explores the character a bit more, including the true origins of his mysterious eyeshine that made him such an asset against the light-sensitive creatures. Riddick's exploits in Butcher Bay lent to a wonderful and wonderful-looking stealth-based experience, which was enhanced by the prison's ecosystem, its nefarious inhabitants, and Riddick's own deadly skills. Also, this really extra main menu. One of the best licensed games of all time? Hey, we think it belongs right alongside GoldenEye. Microsoft definitely did something right when they released Forza Motorsport for the original Xbox. Not only was it one of the best Xbox games right out the gate, which is impressive considering it's a simulation racer, but the Forza name has thrived for more than 20 years across over a dozen games. That's a lot of wheels. Unlike Project Gotham Racing, Forza is mainly all about just crossing the finishing line first as properly as possible. Taking a cue from Gran Turismo, the game favours simulated driving over arcade racing, giving each real-world vehicle an authentic feel. With visual and performance customization, players could create their perfect ride to tackle the somewhat difficult racing experience that was worth the headache to master. And of course, obviously, while it doesn't have the same fidelity as its more recent successors, there's something about its aesthetic that remains simply timeless. Pick it up today and it will probably still crank your drive shaft. For so many fans of the Elder Scrolls series, how you been doing lately? It has been some lean times. Morrowind was probably their introduction. Keeping the open world freeform design of its predecessor, Morrowind perfected much of what the Elder Scrolls II Daggerfall stumbled with a little bit, setting the stage for an experience that players would still love years and years after its release. Morrowind embodies the best parts of the RPG experience, from a be-who-you-want approach to gameplay that lets you build a character from the ground up, choosing from a set of skills, abilities, weapon types and even moral choices to craft a unique hero. The level of customization, depth of gameplay and just room to experiment that Morrowind achieved remains a marvel today as a launching point for some of gaming's best titles, and also Starfield, which was just okay. It was okay. It'll be interesting to see what kind of games from today age nearly as well as Morrowind has. I mean, will people still be talking about Starfield in 20 years? Probably not. Yeah, I mean, what more is there to say about a game like GTA San Andreas that hasn't already been said either by others or even by us over the years? It is arguably Rockstar's most iconic game, and while GTA 5 might be making money hand over fist thanks to the endless re-releases and shark card sales, nothing beats San Andreas for vibes and pure nostalgia. There's a reason why every other scene is some kind of meme, because so many people have played through the game that it's a shared cultural experience. Here we all go again. At this point we probably don't need to recap the story of CJ coming back to Los Santos and just having a bad time of it, but San Andreas felt like the deepest and most mechanically rich game in the whole series. In some ways it still does today. CJ can hit the gym to become stronger with melee weapons, go for a jog to increase his stamina, or just eat 55 burgers, 55 fries, 55 tacos, 55 pies, 55 cokes, 100 tater tots, 100 pizza, 100 tenders, 100 meatballs, 100 coffees, 55 wings, 55 shakes, 55 pancakes, 55 pastas, and 155 taters, and have CJ accumulate mass like his name is Mac. There you go, that's how you say something slightly different about San Andreas. Moral decision making was a pretty big concept during this 6th generation of consoles, and BioWare's Knights of the Old Republic handled it pretty wonderfully. Being set in the Star Wars universe only enhanced the struggle between good and evil, allowing players to choose between the dark or light sides of the Force. Spoiler alert, the dark side's way more fun. Each alignment came with unique force powers that could easily turn the tide of every round-based encounter. Customizing your lightsaber when you finally got your hands on one was a delight, adding another level to really making players feel like they were creating their very own Star Wars adventure. And truly, there is little that can be said about the story without venturing into spoilers, but let's just say that KOTOR's narrative is light years ahead of the sequel trilogies. I bet that remake is struggling because it's just too hard for them to make a game as good as this. Right, so what is the best Xbox game of all time? It's got quite the ring to it. Please don't flood the comments about that cringe segue. It is a tough call deciding between Halo Combat Evolved and Halo 2, both being incredible entries in the Xbox library. But the sequel elevated our time with Master Chief surprisingly by dividing it with a disgraced Covenant elite known as the Arbiter. Halo 2 took a surprising step with a split narrative that followed the Spartan 2 Super Soldier and the Arbiter as they set out to stop the activation of a brand new Halo. The sequel was a bit more polished than Combat Evolved, well, not as far as balance goes anyway, its scope getting a little bigger as we saw more of the Covenant, the Flood and the titular ring. Also, you could dual wield, which was hilariously broken but still fun as hell. Of course, what is a Halo game without multiplayer? Halo 2 featured a 2-player split-screen campaign and was one of the first games to really drive Xbox Live and online multiplayer console gaming in general. Who knows where console multiplayer would be without a series like Halo to make it basically essential. If you're looking for the one game that made Xbox a force to be reckoned with, this is the one right here. Outro gang, would you like more OG Xbox? I always like talking about it. I think, you know, it's not underrated as such, but it's underappreciated in some ways, especially in terms of its library. This, I think, honestly, has one of the most inspected libraries of all time. There's so many weird things on here that people don't know about. So if you want like an Xbox hidden gems video or just weird Xbox games video, let us know down below. I've been Jimmy for Culture Vultures. Been good to have you, and I'll catch you when I catch you.